Today, we're doing a deep dive, a psychological investigation into one of the most chilling short stories ever written, Edgar Allan Poe's The Black Cat. We're going to use the tools of Freudian psychoanalysis to try and unlock the darkest corners of the narrator's mind.
So right off the bat, the story hits us with this terrifying mystery. We have a narrator who insists he was once a gentle, kind-hearted man, but he ends up committing these unspeakable acts of violence. The big question we have to ask is, how does someone like that completely unravel?
And you see the problem right here. In his own words, he describes himself as being so tender-hearted that his friends actually made fun of him for it. Now keep that self-portrait in your head because the person he becomes is, well, it's absolutely shocking.
So let's set the stage. Our narrator, who we never learn the name of, is telling us his story from a prison cell. It's the day before his execution. And he says he wants to set the record straight, to explain what he calls a series of mere household events that have, in his words, terrified, tortured, and ultimately destroyed him.
To understand how he got there, we need a map, and our map for this journey is Freudian psychoanalysis. The basic idea here is that our actions and our personalities are often driven by these powerful, hidden forces, desires and memories that are buried so deep in our minds we're not even aware they're there.
Freud called this hidden part of the mind the unconscious. Think of it like a dark, locked storeroom in your brain. It's where you shove everything you can't, or maybe won't, deal with. Painful memories, primal urges, all those deep-seated conflicts. But here's the most important part. Just because they're locked away doesn't mean they've lost their power. Oh no.
All right, with our tools in hand, let's start the diagnosis. We're on the hunt for the narrator's pre-existing psychological wounds. You know, where did the first cracks in his sanity really begin to show?
And right away, his own words give us a huge clue. He has this profound distrust of people. He calls human friendship paltry and says it has a gossamer fidelity. Basically, it's as flimsy as a spider's web. But animal friendship? Oh, that he sees as pure, unselfish. This isn't just a simple preference, folks. This is a major symptom.
So what does this tell us? It points to a deep, intense fear of betrayal. Remember how he said he was made the jest of his companions when he was young? Well, those emotional wounds never healed. Instead, he repressed them, pushed them down into his unconscious where they just festered and poisoned his ability to ever trust people again.
So, what happens when all that unresolved anger needs to get out? Well, it has to go somewhere. He uses a psychological defense mechanism called displacement. He can't go back and confront the friends who hurt him, so he redirects all that rage onto a safer, less threatening target, his pets, and especially the black cat, Pluto. And to make himself feel okay about this horrible behavior, he uses another defense, rationalization. He blames his violence on what he calls the fiend intemperance, alcohol, or this vague idea of perverseness. He's creating excuses to avoid facing the terrifying truth that the monster is coming from inside him. And that brings us to the main event, the central battlefield. According to Freud, the human mind is in this constant state of conflict, a tug-of-war between three powerful forces all fighting for control. And inside our narrator's head, this war is completely out of control. This internal battle is what psychoanalysts call intrapsychic conflict. It's basically a wrestling match happening in your unconscious. And in this story, we get a front-row seat to a battle where one side is absolutely dominating. First up, we have the id. This is the most primitive, chaotic part of you. It's just a boiling pot of raw instinct, aggression, and desire. It runs on the pleasure principle. It wants what it wants, and it wants it right now, with zero regard for consequences, logic, or morality. Fighting against the id is the superego. This is your conscience. It's that internalized voice of your parents, society, all the authority figures, telling you what's right and wrong. It's the moral guardian, trying to keep the id's crazy urges in check and hitting you with guilt when you mess up. And caught right in the middle of this brawl is the ego. The ego is the referee. Its job is to manage this fight. It tries to satisfy the id's desires, but in a way that's realistic and won't get you thrown in jail, all while trying to keep the superego happy. It's all about finding a balance. But in our narrator's mind, the referee has been knocked out cold. His ego is incredibly weak, totally undeveloped. The primitive, violent demands of his id are just steamrolling the moral objections from his superego. This is a man who is almost entirely driven by his most basic destructive impulses. So, what happens when this internal war finally reaches its breaking point? We are about to witness the final, catastrophic collapse of the narrator's psychological defenses, and it leads directly to the story's horrifying climax. His old tricks, displacing his anger, rationalizing his actions, they just aren't strong enough anymore to keep his dark thoughts repressed. And according to Freud, when your defenses start to fail, the result is this overwhelming anxiety, a terrifying unconscious fear that the id is about to take over completely.
And that is exactly what happens. The ego, the referee, it just collapses entirely. With nothing left to hold it back, the raw, unfiltered rage of the id is unleashed, and in that moment of pure fury, when his wife steps in to defend the cat, he murders her.
And this quote, it is just bone-chilling. After murdering his wife and walling her up, he is so disconnected from reality, so completely controlled by his triumphant id, that he actually taps on the very bricks hiding her body. It's the ultimate sign of a mind that is completely shattered.
This leads us to our final diagnosis. You see, long before he faces the hangman's noose, the narrator has already suffered a kind of psychological death. His mind, totally unable to resolve its internal war, has essentially shut down, leaving him in this constant state of fear and total isolation.
All right, let's wrap up our investigation. What's the final verdict on the narrator of the Black Cat? What have we learned?
The analysis is pretty clear. The narrator thought the threat was external. The cat, his wife, this thing called perverseness. But the real threat was always inside him. He projected his own madness onto the cat, turning it into a symbol for the darkness in his own soul. His story is just a terrifying lesson that unresolved conflicts, they don't just go away. They can fester and erupt into irrational, violent, and destructive behavior.
So in the end, Poe leaves us with this haunting question. The narrator points the finger at the black cat, blaming this animal for his complete and total ruin. But after peeling back all the layers of his mind, we have to ask ourselves, who was the real monster in this story?